This is what just happened this evening, 12:10:25. To begin, I'm staying with my parents for a bit. Today, while they were gone uptown to do their business, I stayed here alone. Right after they left, I went outside to clean out my car for a few minutes, then came back inside to finish doing my laundry. It was around 4 p.m. during this time. About an hour or so later, it had just turned dark. I was in my bedroom sitting on my bed watching a movie. Around this time is when the strange phenomena began. I began to hear some creaking somewhere out in the house and began to feel the floor shifting in random spots. It kept going for a few minutes, then I began to hear this odd screech, sound that either sounded like a shoe or like the noise you would hear if you have clothes in the dryer, and a piece of clothing with maybe a zipper or something on it is sliding around in the dryer, which is kind of ironic being as I had just not too long ago finished drying my laundry, which was mostly my bedding. This sound only occurred sporadically. I finally muted the volume on the TV and just listened quietly. The creaks and shifts continued as if someone was moving along in the house very slowly, and I still heard the occasional screech noise. I heard no voices or shuffling of movement, just the creaks, shifts, and screeches. I asked myself, is someone in the house? I know that houses are going to settle and creak every now and then, even though this one is literally brand new, having only been built this year. Then I was questioning whether or not my parents had made it back and had come in quietly, because it was beginning to sound like someone was out in the house moving very easily. I told myself that I better go check this out. I finally put on my socks to muffle my footsteps, grabbed my pistol, then quietly opened my bedroom door. I peeped around and saw that it was still dark out in the living room, save for the low ambient lights from the oven in the nearby kitchen and hallway, then slowly proceeded to creep around the corner into the kitchen nearby. I paused right around the corner of the kitchen and listened intently. I was still hearing the random floor shifts and creaks, but I was mostly curious as to what that screeching sound was, and by this point it was happening a bit more infrequent. While standing there, I felt a slight cool breeze behind me, but I knew the ceiling fan from the living room was on, and from where I was standing you could still feel it. However, it kind of felt like someone was behind me, so I turned around to look, only to see nothing. I felt that something came up behind me as if to deliberately say, "Hey, what you're looking at? I want to check it out too." I heard the sporadic screeching sound again 2 more times and knew it was coming from the kitchen directly to my right. From my vantage point, it sounded like it was somewhere between the sink area of the center counter and the refrigerator area, which are spread out maybe by 7-10 feet, estimate. I had finally put the noise down to maybe one of the appliances making noise, then walked back into my bedroom and thought nothing more of it. A few minutes later, I came out of my room again and went to the kitchen to warm up some leftovers. I came out to the kitchen again a few more times after this to get more food, look for things, and wash my dishes after eating. It was around this time I also noticed that all of those weird sounds had finally stopped, but I still thought nothing more of it. While washing my dishes, I was just thinking about some stuff and telling myself out loud how screwed up my mother acts sometimes. I said aloud, "That ain't nothing but the devil," right after I said that I felt a presence behind me at the sink. I immediately got the shivers because it was palpable, but at the same time I was trying to play it off. However, the presence didn't feel malevolent or have any feeling at all to it. It was just like something might have been around. I finally got the guts to firmly tell it, "I have no time for any spirits. If there is anyone around me, you need to go away and don't come back." Still a bit shaken, I walked to the other side of the room to turn off the light and went back to my room. While in my room, I was telling myself that I'm going to do some spiritual cleansing because I was feeling a bit heavy in general, and part of it too was that if there was actually any negativity in the house, I would need to cleanse it out while I had a chance since the folks were gone. I grabbed my smudge stick and went to work. I first smudged myself head to toe and chanted aloud for all negativity to be removed. Exactly when I did that, I heard a light pop noise behind me to my right from the other corner of the room, not too far from where I was standing. It sounded as if a small piece of the smudge stick had dropped to the floor, but it was weird because the noise was a few feet away from me. It also felt reactionary to what I was chanting at the time. I curiously said to myself, "Hum." I instantly concluded that the sound was a confirmation that something was definitely around me. I then proceeded to open my bedroom door and go out into the living room, bathroom, the other bedrooms on my side of the house, and so on, while still saying my chants and casting out any negativity, darkness, and saying, "Only love and light dwells in this house." Afterwards, I walked back around and went into the kitchen. When I went around the far side of the center counter area, I got pretty intense with my chants. As I took a few steps forward, the front screen door violently flung open. I stood there shocked. I could not believe what I had just witnessed. I stood scared stiff, trying to process what had just happened. The door then began to slowly retract back and forth on its own. I could see it moving through the front door window. At this point, I'm telling myself somebody's at the door. I was still trying to process all of this as it was happening. I then thought to myself that if my parents had come back, they would have parked in the backyard, and the back sliding glass door was left unlocked so they could get back in. I was standing right there looking at it, but I didn't see the car back there. So I was thinking either this is someone trying to break in or they are about to knock, but neither happened. It then finally dawned on me that whatever I was casting out had actually left, so that confirmed to me that something was actually in the house. I did not expect that to actually happen. I had done plenty of cleansings before, while home alone or otherwise, and on one or two occasions I did feel something lurking around, but this has never happened before. I still stood there stiff in shock and utter disbelief. But I finally got the courage to slowly move towards the door, while this time, quietly and shakily saying my chants to finish driving away whatever that was so that it doesn't come back. I then peeped out the front door window and saw that the screen door stood over halfway open at this point, and not a soul was in sight. I then opened the door and stood in the doorway for a moment, then proceeded to finish my chanting. I cannot lie though. I don't know if it was just my fear and adrenaline at this point or what, but it kind of felt like something was still there and standing not too far behind me from where I stood at the front door. My shocked me even more is that at that very moment my parents finally pulled up. The timing was just crazy in all of this. I still had the front and screen door open. They saw me standing there and pulled up in the driveway instead of going around to the backyard. They sat in the car talking for a moment before getting out and bringing their stuff in. When they stepped in the house and put some bags down, my father said, "Thanks for having the door open." I told him, "Oh, that's not why the door was open. Whatever was just here did that when it left." He gave me a confused look when I said that. He asked, "What do you mean?" And I told him everything that had just happened. He asked, "Was the screen door pulled tightly?" And I said, "Yes, because I was the last person outside earlier and I pulled it tightly as I came in." But I then explained to him, how is it that the screen door was closed all the while until I started cleansing the house? And as soon as I got into the kitchen while saying my chants, the screen door suddenly flings open on its own, violently. Why did it not do that all before when I was alone? I then said to him, "You see, I still got this smudge stick in my hand, don't you? And you can see that there's still smoke throughout the house. You smell it too, right?" And he said, "Yay." So he knew I wasn't making this up because the evidence was right there and immediate. My parents were a bit shocked initially after I told them this, but they didn't seem overly concerned afterwards, because they know that we have had some crazy experiences before. They really didn't say much more about it aside from when I was talking to my father about it a bit more later on. I spent the rest of the night being on edge after what I witnessed because that's the first time I saw something like that. And I've experienced some rather scary stuff in my life, but it's been many years since anything significant like that has happened to me. I had all kinds of anxious questions running through my mind that night. I was just surprised that this time when I decided to cast out evil, it actually left. I don't remember meeting my grandfather's sister until I was an adult. Aunt Pat was a rebel when she was younger. Having been born in the 1920s, she didn't follow the societal rules of a young lady. She was estranged from the family and lived a very adventurous life. She was a true free spirit with claims of being friends with Dizzy Gillespie and other musicians of that time. She spent the 60s in San Francisco and traveled her way back up north. When I met Aunt Pat, she had been living in Seattle and was diagnosed with terminal cancer. My husband and I would often take trips to Seattle to sit at her bedside and hear her stories. We became very close and connected. With Stephen being a musician, Aunt Pat gifted him a gold bookmark with a treble clef on it, round at the top and a point on the bottom. Relevant later. I was unable to go up to Seattle to visit her as planned because a storm had come. I called her to let her know that we wouldn't be coming. We were both pretty sad about it, but that's life in the PNW winter. That night, I had a very realistic dream that I sat at her bedside all night and we talked until the sunrise. It felt so real. She called me that morning and thanked me for the visit. We talked about the conversation we had through the night. Both of us unsure what to think about this experience, for it seemed so real to us, and we both had the same memories of our conversations. Aunt Pat passed away that winter. I will add that before Aunt Pat was diagnosed with cancer, she had custody of her grandson Ryan. Ryan's mom had passed away in her sleep when she was 26. Ryan then went to live with my mother after Aunt Pat was diagnosed. I had placed the bookmark that Aunt Pat gifted Stephen in a curio cabinet along with crystals and a variety of other stones. One day when I walked by the cabinet, I noticed the bookmark was pointing in the back left of the cabinet. I thought, "That's weird," and replaced it to the right side with the point facing the front of the cabinet like it originally was. I then went about my business. Next week I noticed again that it was in the back left corner with the point facing the back of the cabinet. This time I asked my husband and 3 daughters if they had been moving it. They all said no. I started to pay more attention to the bookmark to see what was going on. I saw that the bookmark had moved forward in the case. A few days later it turned around to the center of the case, then back to the front, turning yet again and pointing to the back left corner. This happened all in a week. The bookmark went around the stones and followed the same path. I removed the stones from the cabinet and put powder down on the glass to see if there would be fingerprints or something to tell me a clue of what was happening. I replaced the bookmark to the original position, minus the stones, and shut the door. The bookmark made the same path to the back left corner within the week. There was a perfect track with no other prints or marks. Hello, Aunt Pat. In the following months, I had many visits from Aunt Pat. I should say here that I have always had visits from people who have passed. Usually it's to give a message to those left behind. I don't always know the person, but I always find out within days to come who it was. That's another story. My visits from Aunt Pat were usually her checking in, saying, "Hi, I am here." One visit she asked me to tell her son that she was really sorry. This was 3 months after she passed. I asked my mother about this, and she informed me that they had a huge falling out years ago. Once my mother had spoken to her son, the visit stopped. Until, a few years later, I was working at one of my clients' houses. Aunt Pat showed herself to me and said, "Don't worry, he's with me." Having no clue what she was talking about, I said okay and went about my business. At 4:30 p.m. that evening, my mother called me to let me know that Ryan had passed in his sleep. He was 26, the same age as his mom when she passed in her sleep. I told my mother that I already knew and that he was with Aunt Pat. I never heard from Aunt Pat again. When I was on my back patio preparing the centerpieces for my cousin Ryan's memorial, I turned around to find him standing there clear as day. It's always a little shocking when this happens. He says to me, "Please tell everyone thank you." He faded. I never heard from Ryan again. This happened when I was around 15 years old. Back then, my dad and I had this weird habit. He used to call it spooking. Basically, we'd go out late at night and walk through old, abandoned cemeteries. We weren't trying to summon anything. We weren't messing with spirits or touching graves. We just walk around, take everything in, and leave. We were living in North Carolina at the time, and there were a lot of really old cemeteries out there. The kind where the headstones are cracked, names are worn away, and time has clearly done its damage. That night felt completely normal. I wasn't scared. Nothing felt off. It was just another late night walk. We got there right at midnight. Absolute silence. No cars, no people, no sounds at all. Just rows of graves, darkness, and that heavy nighttime stillness. We parked the truck and started walking through the cemetery. Hours went by. We moved from grave to grave, each one telling a story that no one could hear anymore. Then slowly, the night crept toward morning. I'm guessing it was around 3 a.m. when everything changed. I passed by this one grave that looked especially old. The name on it was barely readable. The ground had sunk in around it, like the earth itself was trying to swallow it. That's when I felt it, this sudden tingling crawling up the back of my neck. The kind of feeling you get when you know something behind you isn't right. I stopped and turned around. On the ground, I saw my shadow. And another one. The second shadow was clearly human. Arms, legs, a head perfectly shaped, but there was no person standing there. No body, nothing, just a shadow alive on the ground. I moved my hand. My shadow moved. The other shadow moved too. I took a step back. It stepped back. It stayed about 4 feet away from me the entire time. Never closer, never farther. I froze, my breathing went shallow. My heart started pounding like it was trying to break out of my chest. The longer I stared at it, the worse the fear got. This wasn't like the shadow figures people talk about. This wasn't something on a wall. This thing was on the ground, and it was moving on its own. That's when it hit me. I wasn't just scared. I was being hunted. I screamed for my dad. I yelled as loud as I could, but he didn't answer. He was only a few yards away, yet it was like he couldn't hear me at all. In that moment, I felt completely alone, like I'd been cut off from the world. Then I ran, and the shadow ran too. No matter how fast I went, it matched me, step for step. It never lagged behind. I knew deep down that if I tripped, if I slowed down even for a second, something horrible would happen. I sprinted straight for the truck, yanked the door open and slammed it shut behind me. I was shaking, gasping for air. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. I looked out the window. The shadow was standing right outside the truck. It didn't just stand there. It slowly tilted its head toward me. Like it knew I was inside. Like it was looking at me. That was when I knew this wasn't a trick of the light. This wasn't my imagination. This wasn't normal. I don't know how long I stayed there. Time felt frozen. Then suddenly my dad walked up to the truck. As soon as he got close, I looked back outside. The shadow was gone. Just gone. Like it had never existed. I've never seen anything like it again. I've heard stories about shadow people before, but this was different. This thing had no source. It moved on its own. It chased me. More than 10 years have passed since that night. But that shadow, that run, that tilted head, it still burned into my memory. And to this day, I still don't know what was with me in that cemetery that night. This happened when I was about 15 years old. My dad and I were driving back home after visiting a friend. We lived between Portage, Wisconsin, and Endeavor, Wisconsin. That whole area isn't very urban at all. Most of the roads out there are rural, quiet, and surrounded by thick woods. My friend's house was also in a pretty remote spot, with barely any neighbors around. The drive from their place to ours wasn't straight or simple. The road twisted and curved, dipping down and climbing up, with dense trees lining both sides, trees so thick they made the area feel dark even during the day. When we left, it was early dusk. The sky still had streaks of red and blue, and the sun hadn't fully set yet. But inside the woods, it already felt dark. Our headlights were on and the wind was picking up. Inside the car, things were quiet. It was just a normal drive home. The road was empty, no other cars anywhere. All you could hear was the wind moving through the trees and the occasional rustling of leaves. We were approaching a sharp curve in the road. On one side was deep forest, and on the other was a ditch running alongside the road. As we got closer to the curve, I suddenly noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. At first, I didn't really lock onto it. That kind of thing happens sometimes while driving. Your peripheral vision catches something random, but this felt different. When I focused a little more, I saw something black, something that looked like smoke or a shadow coming out of the woods toward the road. It wasn't moving slowly. It was fast, way too fast, heading straight toward us. The weirdest part was that it wasn't touching the ground. It was floating like it didn't need to walk or run. It didn't have a clear shape. No arms, no legs, no head. Just this dense black mass constantly shifting the way smoke moves. The moment it clicked that this wasn't normal, I turned my head to look directly at it. At the exact same time, my dad saw it too. Everything happened in a split second. My dad jerked the steering wheel, swerving the car so we wouldn't hit it. The car veered slightly, then straightened out again. My heart was pounding. My dad asked me, clearly shaken, "Did you see that too?" All I said was, "Yeah." He immediately replied, "We both saw the same thing. Don't look back." There was fear in his voice, but also authority. I listened. I didn't turn around. We just kept driving straight toward home. The car was completely silent. No radio, no talking, nothing. We made it home, parked the car, went inside. But that night, and for a long time after, we never talked about it. I didn't ask questions. My dad didn't explain anything. It was like we both silently agreed that whatever we saw wasn't something we wanted to dig into. Years went by. One day we finally talked about it, and that's when things got even stranger. I found out that it wasn't just that one night. After that incident, both of us, at different times, had seen the same thing again. It would appear outside our house, sometimes near the trees, sometimes just standing there in the darkness. It never came close. It never tried to enter the house. It always stayed outside. The strange thing was you could feel it there, but it didn't feel aggressive. It wasn't attacking. It was just present, quiet, still, sometimes barely moving. I've experienced other paranormal stuff in my life, but this one stuck with me more than anything else. For years, I tried to explain it logically. Maybe it was an animal, maybe some kind of shadow effect, maybe a natural phenomenon. But no explanation ever fit. It didn't move like an animal. It didn't walk on the ground. It was just a fast-moving, floating shadow. It's been 10 years since that happened. I live in Texas now, far away from that road, that forest, and that house. But the image of that night, the dusk sky, the trees, and that black shape moving toward the road is still crystal clear. Some experiences don't fade with time. And if you've ever seen something like this, you already know. Some things aren't just seen once, they stay with you for life. This event happened at Tuesday morning, 8/19/25. I have a habit of being awake in the wee hours of the morning on a fairly regular basis. This particular morning, I was up late working on some music projects. I had my earbuds in listening to a track when suddenly, I heard 3 loud, rapid knocks right at the window behind my bed's headboard. It scared the living plus out of me. Startled, I snatched out my earbuds and laid low for a brief moment, wondering who in the could be knocking on my window at this time of the morning. This has never happened before, so I'm there ducked down trying to process what just happened. In those brief moments, my mind is racing, and I thought for a second, could it have been one of my household relatives that went outside and perhaps locked themselves out? Then I thought, could it be someone from around the neighborhood up to no good or perhaps needing something? Then I thought that maybe I was hearing things, but the knocking was loud, and I actually felt the thud of the window. That's actually what got my attention, and it was loud enough that I heard it beyond my earbuds. I quickly jumped out of bed and grabbed my pistol. I then slowly peeped out the blinds of the window to see if anyone was out there, but oddly there was no one there. That side of the house is well lit by a nearby street light, and my car was right there next to that window. Still peeping out the window, I looked around the car and waited to see if maybe someone was hiding behind it on the other side, but I didn't see anyone. I angled my gaze downward to see if anyone might have ducked down below the window alongside the house, but no one was in sight. I then went out of my bedroom and slowly peeked around the corner into the front room to see if by chance anyone else was awake and happened to make a loud noise, which I thought was at the window, but came from another part of the house instead. However, I saw that they were all sound asleep, snoring loudly. I then peeked out the blinds in the front room, where my relatives were sleeping, to look out in the yard, but I saw no one in the yard. If someone were to flee, it would have took them a few minutes to get far enough to exit the yard, and they would have been well in view of the street light. I went back in my bedroom and looked at the clock on my laptop. I saw it was 2:48, right before 3 a.m., which is said to be witching hour. At this point, I'm on edge and starting to think that it may have been something paranormal happening. For the sake of protection, I burned some sage and told whatever it was to leave me alone and return where it came from. I laid back down in bed on edge for the remainder of the morning until daybreak, but nothing else ever did happen. The following night came and I again was awake in the wee hours. Naturally, I was on edge waiting for something to happen again, but nothing ever did.